Is it already that time of day again? Welcome back, guys and gals. JJ here, schooloftrade.com. Another psychology video here to start off your week. In today's psychology lesson, I'm going to talk about pattern recognition, but not the candlestick patterns that you're probably assuming. More importantly, pattern recognition of behavioral and decision making that I can almost guarantee you is affecting your trading results. Today, I want to show you how to identify 4 simple psychological patterns that, if identified and used correctly, are going to help create positive, lasting, and most importantly, life-changing growth for your trading career and probably everything else in your life as well. Now, I got to remind you, in my previous lesson, we talked about using a trading journal, right? Because when we start keeping track of our decisions, we begin to see patterns in our personality. And today I want to talk about how to identify those patterns and how to use them for positive change. But before I go into the lesson today, I got to remind you guys that this psychology lesson is the most recent in a series of videos that we publish every week on this YouTube channel. And these videos build on the topics already discussed. So this is the first time you're watching. It's great. I'm great to have you here with us. But you might want to go back and start from the beginning to get the most value out of this entire group of videos, this series of videos, right? So not to worry. I'll put a link right up top here in the video. Grab that link, go back to the beginning, right, and watch them in order. That way you can get the most out of this psychology series. I also want to remind you, if you're on our YouTube channel right now, make sure you subscribe to YouTube channel. Click that little bell icon so you get notified every time I post a new video. And if you really want to stay in tune with what's going on here at School of Trade, head over to the homepage at schooloftrade.com, right, and join that mailing list. That way you'll never miss an opportunity, right, to keep in touch. Okay. So now that we got that out of the way, let's get into today's session. The topic of today's psychology lesson is how to use pattern recognition in your trading journal to cultivate positive changes in your trading career. Have you ever heard someone say times change, but people never change? It's actually pretty accurate. We can't change our individual personalities. It's basically born inside of us. Don't believe me? Ask your parents. Ask your siblings if you're an adult, right? Ask them to tell you stories about your childhood, and you'll see that your personality, the way you handled success, the way you handled failure, the way you interacted with other people probably hasn't changed much since the day you were born. In fact, our individual personalities have both weaknesses and strengths to them. We really can't change them very much. So our job as traders is to identify our weaknesses, identify our strengths, work around our weaknesses, and try to leverage and maximize those strengths. It's important to understand that it's almost impossible to remove the weaknesses in our personality. We need to work around them rather than trying to remove them. At the same time, there are certain parts of your personality that are undoubtedly amazing, right? And we should seek to maximize, build our careers around these personality strengths, because that's the easiest path to success. Knowing this information now, I'm sure there are a lot of traders out there who have never even come close to their true potential because they haven't learned to identify and work around those weaknesses. And they can't leverage and build on their strengths because they don't know what they are, right, to begin with. This is why using a trading journal is so important. It gives us the priceless data we need to identify these patterns so we can start making positive changes in our trading. Now, when it comes to finding the patterns in your personality, I think the easiest solution is to break them into 2 different categories. 1, patterns that are helping you, and 2, patterns that are hurting you. So first, we need a journal. I talked about this in my last video. And so you need to have a journal going for at least 30 days of journaling. So if you haven't started your journal yet, now is the time to start. I always joke around with you guys on these videos by saying the best time to start a trading journal was yesterday. And if you didn't start yesterday, you're better off start today. Now, after you invest enough time in your journal, then you can start looking back at your journal results to start seeing those patterns emerge on the pages. To do this, look at your journal and find times when you're trading at your best and find times when you're trading at your worst. An example of this would be you look back at your journal, you identify times when you went on a winning streak, and you identify times when you had a bit of a cold streak, right? Consistent losses. Looking back at those times in your journal, you might notice that when times were good, you took fewer, more selective trades, and you were probably pretty methodical with your stops and your targets. You might also notice that when times got tough for you, when you went on a losing streak, you probably, I know I do, you start over trading, right? You take more trades, really unqualified trades, right? Almost gambling trades, and your stops and targets aren't as consistent as before, right? You'll see those patterns when you're winning trades, right? And you're losing trades. The key is to use your journal consistently, making notes each day, taking notes for each trade, and writing down the summary, right? Do you recall this from last week's session, right? I'll put a link up here as well in the video. Again, if you haven't watched that previous video, again, these all build on themselves. So for example, one of the things I noticed in my personal journal was that when times were going well, I would write the word patience more often. On the flip side, when times were going tough for me, I saw myself writing the word forced it more often. These weren't just once or twice. I noticed these, what I call trigger words. These trigger words consistently over many, many weeks of journaling. And it's amazing how my results matched my terminology, which helped me identify the patterns in my decisions that I needed to address if I wanted to be successful. So reading through my journal quite often, it was also easy to see that trades taken after lunch, trades taken in the afternoon were remarkably less successful, which helped me make the tough decision, it was not an easy decision at the time, to focus only on the morning session. After reading my journal, there was no question what I needed to change. And with that knowledge, I had the power that I needed now to make that change. Having the data from our journal, recognizing those patterns, the patterns become the knowledge becomes the power to take that next step, right, and start getting long-term, lasting, positive change in my career. But let's dig deeper into these patterns, right? We talk about candlestick patterns, right, all the time on my nightly newsletter, if you watch that every evening. But you know what? There are two basic psychological patterns, right, that you want to be thinking about. One would be emotional patterns, and two would be behavioral patterns. Emotional patterns and behavioral patterns. Now, don't forget, if you go to the blog at Sideways Markets, I have all the text for these videos right below the video, right? So you can follow right along by reading the text right below it. If you're on YouTube, I'll put a link in the description of the YouTube video. Okay, so there are two basic patterns, emotional patterns and behavioral patterns. Let's start first with emotional patterns, right? Emotional patterns are how you felt at the beginning of the day, how you felt when you entered the trade, right? How you felt during the trade, right? And how you feel after you close the trade. This would also include my level of focus, what was going through my mind during the trade, and how I felt afterward. Now, one of my best clients uses his journal to give himself an emotional score for each trade he takes. I love this, and I'm going to share it with you guys. So basically, every trade that he takes, he gives himself an emotional score, right? With 10 being confident, right? And 1 being whatever the opposite, right, of confident, right? 10 being confident and positive, right? 1 being not very confident, right? And pretty negative opinion about this trade. And what he does is he'll put that little emotional score at the top of each, right, at the top of each trade that he marks. This simple trick over 30 days allows him to quickly assign, right, look at those emotion scores and begin to see that pattern in his trading. I love that one. Okay, so emotional patterns, right? How you feel at the beginning of the day, right? How you feel when you enter the trade, how you feel when you're in the trade, when you close the trade. Assign that emotion score. I love that idea. Okay, now let's talk about the second type of pattern, and that is behavioral patterns. Okay, behavioral patterns are the physical act of preparing for the trade, the act of entering the trade, managing the trade, closing the trade. Right? This would also include the physical decision about the markets you're trading, the times you're trading, the position sizing, right, on your trades, et cetera, the physical aspects, the mechanics of that trade. Now, I've seen other clients of mine use their journal, and I like this one as well, use their journal to classify each trade as level 1, level 2, or level 3. So level 1 trades are almost perfect, whereas level 3 trades are borderline gambling trades, right? By using a system of classification, right? We talked about emotion score before, but now, right, classifying each trade as level 1, 2, or 3, now when I go back and look at my trades that I took each day over a 30-day window, I can now start seeing these patterns develop, okay? So behavioral patterns, emotional patterns. Now let's put them together, right? Let's put a strategy together. An interesting aspect of these patterns, behavioral, right, and emotional, is they often blend into each other, okay? So for example, a behavioral pattern, such as entering a trade too late in the day, may cause a loss, right? And that loss triggers an emotional pattern, such as revenge trading, which guess what? Causes another loss, right? That loss results in low concentration, low energy levels, which now kick in more emotional patterns. In other words, it's remarkable how emotions lead to behavior, which comes right back to emotions, and it creates it's this cycle, right, that we get stuck in. The goal of your journal is to consistently be writing in that journal. I gave you a strategy last time, right? Be specific, be methodical, try to use those trigger words, right, that will help to identify these patterns in the future. Knowing this now, let's put it all into action. First, I would suggest a very methodical, almost mechanical approach to your journal, rather than just scribbling down whatever comes to your mind. In my previous lessons, right, we talked about beginning the day by writing an opening plan of attack, then writing about each trade that I take, the reasons why, how I felt, right? We talked about assigning an emotional score to it, right? A classification, 1, 2, or 3 to it, right? And then the third thing was to finish the day with a summary along with all the actionable things that you saw today. Taking strategies from some of my best clients, right? We assign an emotional score, right? And we classify each trade as level 1, 2, or 3. This simple format, this methodical format, combined with these little shortcuts, it's going to make it really easy for you to look back over, again, a 30-day period of trades and begin to see, wow, I'm starting to see the data forming patterns, right? And now I can make positive change. I would also recommend trying to use some form of standardized language, right? Like trigger words in my journal. You know, for example, I mentioned earlier, right? I use the word forced when I find myself chasing trades, entering trades don't fit my plan. I use the word patience, right, a lot when I'm on a winning streak, right? Because usually when I'm winning, right, I'm staying patient. Now, it becomes a lot easier to see these types of behavioral patterns when I'm using the same phrases consistently. So think of your own phrases. Create your own words if you want to, right? A few years ago, I had a friend of mine that would use the word cobra, right? Any time he had a great trade where it all came together, right? Level 1 high, emotion score high, great pattern, he would put that word cobra, right on his journal. I got a kick out of it. But you know what? For him, anytime he saw the word cobra on his journal, right, he could search for it. Don't ask me how it came with the word cobra, right? But it was a word that he knew he would only use during that, right, checkmate type of trade that he took, right? And then he'd go back and really look at those, isolate those environments, say, where was I mentally? Where was I physically, right? When I cobra, right? It's kind of foolish, but boy, does it work, right? So use those same phrases consistently. Think of your own phrases, right? Have some fun with it, right? Say, cobra, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? That way you can't do this incorrectly. All you got to do is do it consistently. All right, so we've covered a lot in this psychology video here so far. Let's do a recap, shall we? Today we talked about using our trading journal to identify patterns in our emotions and patterns in our actions. We learned that there are two basic types of patterns, those that help us and those that hurt us. Right? We also learned that those that help and hurt us, right, can be broken into two more patterns, emotional and behavioral. We learned that our emotions often affect our behavior, and our behavior often affects our emotions, right? And it keeps going back and forth, right, in a cycle. We then talked about using our journal to identify those different types of patterns, right? I gave you a format, and we talked about this in a lot more detail in my last video, right? We talked about writing the opening bell plan of attack, writing about each trade that we take, right? Finishing the day with a summary, right? And a list of actionable things that came out of that summary. We talked about the emotional score for each trade. We talked about classifying each trade as a 1, 2, or 3, right? We talked about using the trigger words, right? Cobra, right? We talked about that type of trigger words, right? Using those methodically, consistently in your journal. And when we combine all this together, over a 30-day period, right? You're not going to see this in a week, okay? You don't see anything in a week, right? Go to the gym for a week, you don't see any changes. Diet for a week, right? Start meditating for a week. You don't see any changes in a week, right? So settle in, get into the rhythm of it, go 30, 60, 90 days, and all of a sudden, you're going to start seeing those patterns. And once you see those patterns, you're going to have the priceless information about everything you need to be successful. But I got some more for you. Later on this week, in my next psychology video, later this week, I'm going to show you how to use these patterns to become a great trader. Not a good trader, a great trader, right? And I'm going to talk more about that in our next video, right? So look up for that later on this week. Wrapping things up, I hope you found a ton of value in today's psychology lesson. Do me a favor, will you drop me a comment below this video with any additional topics you'd like to see me cover in my next psychology video? Make sure you give me a thumbs up if you found value. Subscribe to our channel if you're not already. And please don't forget to share this video with another trading friend. And don't forget, you can find me every morning, 8 o'clock Eastern time, working hard in my trade room, finding all those Cobra trades with all of our members here at schooloftrade.com, right? I get a great free trial on the homepage of schooloftrade.com. Check that out. I publish my nightly newsletter every evening on my blog before 8 p.m. You got to see that. If you like these videos, you'll love that nightly newsletter. And I am, as always, excited to see you again on my next psychology lesson. My name is Joseph. Be well out there. Be nice to each other, will you? Be here next time. I'll see you in a couple days. Adios, amigos. Bye-bye for now.